Havering sixth form.
Okay, and welcome to the final theme of nationalism for this afternoon, or the final strand of nationalism, anti-colonial and post-colonial nationalism. Before we start, I'd just like to say a few thank yous. I'd like to thank my mother for her constant love. I'd like to thank Dennis Burkamp and Larry Leaf, who's made all this possible. Okay, so although we put forward that nationalism itself as an ideology was born in Europe, it was exported through imperialism and became a worldwide concept. And the experience of colonial rule helped to forge a sense of nationhood and a desire for national liberation amongst the peoples of Asia and Africa. So in a sense, we exported nationalism as an ideology, and it gave rise to this specifically anti-colonial form of nationalism. And as the European empires collapsed after the Second World War, there was a mounting combination of nationalist pressures from the conquered territories and also a decline in domestic performance persuaded the colonial powers to depart from their positions. Peacefully, in the case of India in 1947, Malaysia in 1957. However, the declination that was characterised in the post-45 period was sometimes armed struggle. For example, in Algeria, in Vietnam, and then some serious conflicts where national groups were rising up to kick out the colonial powers. So in a sense, the colonising Europeans had taken with them the seed of their own destruction. They had taken the doctrine of nationalism. And it's notable that many of the leaders of these newly crafted African and Asian nations had been educated in the West and were therefore steeped in liberal background, understood the works of the liberal nationalists of Mazzini and Wilson. Now, linked in with this, and an important point to make, is not only is there this connection with liberal nationalism, but there is also a strong connection to political and social revolution. There is no doubt that anti-colonial nationalism had a socialist tinge to it. Many of the uprisings were put forward revolutionary Marxist terminology. Mao in China, Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, Castro in Cuba. And as socialism really appealed powerfully to nationalists in the developing world. The main reason for this was because socialism provided an analysis for the inequality that was experienced via colonial rule. The oppressed and the oppressor. So it's Marxist kind of dialectic terms between the have and the have-nots. And Lenin himself argued very clearly that imperialism itself and colonial rule was part of the class struggle, and that very much imperialism was essentially an economic position, a quest for profit by capitalist countries seeking investment, cheap labour, and raw materials. So as a result, the overthrow of colonial rule was not only political independence, but also a social revolution, looking for some kind of both political and economic emancipation. In some cases, developing what have actually openly embraced Marxist-Leninist principles, China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on, closely following the Soviet model. In other cases, less ideological, Algeria, Libya, a kind of nationalistic kind of socialism, and in certain African countries, they've put forward a kind of African socialism, which is not based at all on the Soviet style, but instead about traditional communitarian values, and we've seen it in places like Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Angola. The post-colonial period has thrown up quite various different forms over the years, but what's also very clear is that as the Soviet Union declined, there was their kind of the position that was adopted, rather than being Soviet or being socialist, in fact became quite anti-Western and increasingly anti-United States and US culture. They were seen as being the principal vehicle for this, of showing and putting across this anger and this resentment, came in the form of religious fundamentalism, and in particular political Islam. So, just to summarise, and I think it's what we can say about nationalism as an ideology, is that it's clearly got consistent themes. The basis being this idea of self-government, self-determination, the political side of nationalism. But what you've really got to keep in mind is that it is this schizophrenic ideology. It can be taken, it can be used, it can be co-opted by leaders and statesmen for their own ends. So when looking at the question, is nationalism a coherent or a single doctrine, then yes, there are basic fundamentals, but clearly the different strands of nationalism take it in a very different routes. And that shows that the emotional side of nationalism can be harnessed by various different leaders and statesmen. Okay, thank you for listening. Well done.